All right, hey, so what's up, guys? So this recording was technically not done during my normal Bible study. It originally was, but for some reason, in the middle of the recording, I suppose my computer had ran out of space. So I just kept going on with the Bible study after that. So here I am, kind of re-recording uh, today's message, which is kind of funny uh, on it on it happening that way. Because what's been going on is these past few weeks we've been talking about the fruit of the spirit, and we've touched on love, joy, and peace. And as much as this hits home in other ways, but the irony in it is uh, this message is on patience. So I find that pretty funny that with all that happening that day, and having to kind of take some time out of another day to re-record this message. I had to have some patience. So I think while I was talking about it to my Discord community, God was like, let's see if you have any. So so this word kind of hits home with me. But not to mention my wife tells me I need to learn patience. With her, it's patience, patience, patience. But why is that such a tough trait to hone and master? Like maybe you have a lot of patience, or you're like me and you struggle with it. Um, that's I feel it's a very common thing. But what does patience mean to you? Uh, is it calmly waiting in the checkout line at a grocery store? Is it teaching your child how to tie your shoes? Or tie their shoes, I'm sorry, tie their shoes. Um, or is it waiting for God to answer your prayer? You know, patience is more than a waiting. It's a process that pushes you uh, towards Jesus. And today that's what we're going to be talking about, and looking at the trials of Joseph in the book of Genesis, and learn how to grow in peace. Now in this series called Taste and See that we've been doing, the series was according to my church, it was planned it, for a reason. During the time there was a lot going on. We had the election not too long ago, and they felt that as if there was ever been a season where to show God's character, the time is now. It's always a great time to show God's character, but with the division and kind of disorder and chaos that we have within our country, I think now is a great time to show God's character, and that's the reason why it was kind of planned for that. But over the past few weeks, these messages have been more resources about how it looks to live out your faith. Because your community, your classroom, your office, whatever it may be, they need to see the character of God more than ever. So what I had hoped is that in doing this series, it's almost been like kind of getting a physical. If you ever played high school sports, you know that you need to get a physical. At least that's how it was at my high school. If you had one, you know what it's like. You kind of get to the doctor's office. Doctor comes in, gets their seat, kind of like rolls up to you, kind of makes you take in these deep breaths, and he puts that cold stethoscope to your chest, and might take a little bit of blood. So you do all that, results come back, and it says that you need a little iron, you need a little bit more protein, and you kind of figure out where you are as far as your health goes. Well, in this series, that's kind of the idea. It's like it's showing the 9 characteristics of God, or of the fruit of the Spirit, And the idea is that you're looking in your life for those things in your life, seeing that those fruits are being produced within you. The physical is for you. It's not for me. How awkward would it be if I got your physical back? I don't need to know about what you need. I need to look at my life, my tree, and begin to ask, hey, like, which one of these fruits am I missing? Because if you are a follower of Christ, these things are in you. And this series is to help kind of begin to bring them out, to see what you're looking for. Why is this important? Because we will be known by our fruit. So, as you're listening to this message, I want you to ask yourself about your fruit. Start to examine the fruit in your life. I want to encourage you in this message, because you may have not known this, but life by the Spirit looks a whole lot different. So if you have your Bibles or you're just listening and taking notes, whatever it may be, go ahead and go to the book of Galatians in chapter 5. We've kind of been in this book or letter, if you will, for a little while now, for at least 2 series, and we've been reading this key text for a couple weeks, and there's a subtle little subtitle to the text that's in my Bible, at the top of verse 16, and it says life by the Spirit. So that's kind of what the foundation of what's going on right here is talking about your life when you walk within the Spirit, when you have the Spirit of God within you. And that's the goal with this series, is that as we begin to go through our life, not by our flesh but by our spirit, because that's real different, by the Spirit of God in us. So Galatians 5 verse 16 said, I'll read through 16 through 18. So it says, "So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law." So we live that battle day in and day out. It happens in parenting. I don't know if you're parents, but if you are, it happens in parenting. It happens while you're driving down the road. You get a little bit of that road rage. The flesh wants you to to kind of honk, yell, scream, maybe even show a slight finger gesture, whatever it may be. But it's a battle. But in this battle, you have to choose to lean into the Spirit. Now, when we begin to lean into the Spirit, here's what you can expect to come out of your life. And with this incredible list of things starting in verse 22. It says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit." So we've kind of zeroed in on each characteristic one by one. We've looked at one of these each week, and we started with love. And when you think about life by the Spirit, you can't help but kind of go like, oh, there it is. There's love. It's like you see God loved us so much that He gave His Son for us. You know the gospel. You've heard the gospel, so you think, man, that's got to be in me. So I've got to begin to love people differently. And then we got to the part of joy, and for some of us, joy comes naturally, and for some, we kind of have to dig deep for it. It's like the song, "I've got the joy, deep in my heart." Where? Deep in my heart. It's a reminder to us that maybe it's not just happiness. It's joy, and it's found deeper in your heart. It's part of the Holy Spirit. It's a fruit. So last week we had talked about a tough one. We talked about peace, and I hope I encouraged you just to hear that peace is possible. Because sometimes we get into these patterns where we can't find peace. But now we know it's a fruit of the Spirit, and now it's something that God places in us. It's not something that we can find anywhere. It's a gift from God. But like I said at the beginning of this, this week we're going to talk about patience. And I hope I'm not the only one, but does anyone else struggle with patience? For me, it is a struggle. So I got this 4-year-old son, right? And boy, does he really love to test my patience. And oftentimes I fail that test. Here lately, putting him to bed is like fighting a war. I've fought the Taliban before, and they got nothing on my son. He really does try me. And there's some nights where I just want to square up with the little dude, man. But it's a fight. It is a fight. But and that's not just with parenting. That could be anybody. You don't have to have kids to struggle with patience. Another thing that kind of like grinds my gears a little bit is say I'm in line at a gas station, and I got my arm full of Ghost energy drinks and iced honey buns, and say there's a person at the register buying up all the scratch off tickets with cash. Okay, that right there just kind of like I start quietly huffing and puffing, because I'm being impatient while just standing in line. And, I admit it, I'm guilty of it. I don't say nothing, but, deep down inside, I'm like, oh my God, like, let's go. Might even grit my teeth a little bit. But today I want to encourage you, and even, encourage myself, that patience is possible. Now, here's the problem. And when you begin to dive into this text, and when you first come across patience, you're almost like, well, some of y'all, not so much me, you're almost like, this is a softball. Like, I got what's going on here. Like, I need to be patient. I need to be patient with my kid, patient with people. But when you dive into this passage, there's a whole nother side to patience. And I want you to see this definition because this is going to challenge you. And here's what patience means in this context. Okay? So it's meaning active endurance, steadfastness, perseverance, patient in trials, long suffering. Now, by that definition of patience, I already knew I was bad, but I'm nowhere, near the standard line. Because those things, I run from those things. Nobody wants to suffer. Nobody wants that, especially long suffering. Nobody wants to go through trials, but we're going to have them. And, we tend to run from those things. We tend to try to flee those difficult seasons. We as humans, we love comfort. We always try to do things the easy way. And then by doing that, we fall into our fleshly desires. But that's not what God is calling us to do. And like I said, I'm guilty of this. But I need to change my perspective. So let me give you a totally different perspective on active endurance, on long suffering. And this came from James, in the book of James. And here's what James had to say on what we're to do when we hit a difficult season of our life. Now watch how different James's perspective is from my poor perspective. All right. So in James chapter 1 verses 2-4, he says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So let's start where it says, consider it pure joy. And I'm telling you, when difficult seasons come, or there's a difficult conversation, I might do what you do. Say you're at the dinner table, or with Thanksgiving coming up. The gravy comes by and it's just not hidden like it used to, and you just kind of pass it. Something else comes along, maybe the cranberry sauce. I don't like cranberry sauce. You just kind of pass it. You just keep passing things by. But what James is saying is no, there's a different perspective. When you're walking through something difficult or you see a hard season coming up, you may need to endure that. You may not need to run from it. You may not need to look for the shortcut, because it takes those seasons to develop, to build character, and to become complete. You can't build character or become complete without trials. James, he isn't crazy. He isn't excited about the difficult things, but he does shift his mind. Us impatient folks, we tend to go for the short term. We think about the short term and what's going on right now. But James, he's all long term. He's saying that there could be some really good things that come through me walking through this. Then he says this: whenever you face trials of many kinds, and here's the reality, guys. You were either just finishing a trial, you're in a trial, or you're about to step into a trial. That's life on this side of heaven. That saying, sometimes it do be that way, and it really do be that way. So, T, how do you know that's true? Because that's what Jesus said. In John 16:33, Jesus said, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. We're going to have to change our perspective. People think that just because we're Christians, we don't have to face trial and our life is perfect. Even some Christians think that. But that couldn't be further from the truth. They, you got some, and this has been me before too. You start to get all them 9 characteristics. You ask Jesus into your heart, everything's going great. You got love, you got joy, you got peace, you got patience, you got all those characteristics of God in you. But at the first sight of trouble or difficulty, life starts to life, and it shakes them up, and they start questioning their faith. We have to change our perspective. Until we get to heaven, we're going to face trials. But instead of fleeing and running, we need to endure it. You're probably thinking, how in the world am I going to do that? With the fruit of the Spirit. That's how you're going to do it. God is going to give you patience. Now, I want you to repeat after me. And this might be difficult for you. You might even feel like you're lying. But I'll say them too. Well, obviously, I'm saying them, you're repeating after me. But, it's still weird for me to say it because it's still something that I struggle with. But the 3 words are, I am patient. How? Because of the fruit of the Spirit. Jesus is going to help me. He's going to help you be patient. We just have to believe in him. We have to trust him. We have to surrender to him. Lean on him, not on ourselves, because we all fall short of the glory of God. There's nothing that we can do, but he can do everything. But let me give you a kind of another example of a great example of patience, right? And it's at the very front of the Bible in the book of Genesis about Joseph. And believe it or not, this story lasts for 13 chapters. Genesis 37 all the way to 50. I won't read all 13 chapters, but I will do my best to kind of summarize to you the life of Joseph. Joseph, he endured some hard times. He was a part of a dysfunctional family. Some of you already might be relating to this guy. Joseph was 17 years old. At the time, I'm getting ahead of myself. Just give me a second. Joseph was a favorite child. He was one of 12 sons. And why is there 13 chapters? To lay out. There's a reason for it. If you go back and look, there's a lot. But it takes 13 chapters to lay out all the different trials in Joseph's life. All right? And, maybe the word for you is complicated, like your life, when you're talking about your life. Maybe you're thinking that your life is complicated. You're like, my story has layers. But same thing as Joseph. And each chapter is just, it just gets more and more complicated. And Joseph, he understood that. That was him. But Joseph was a dreamer, and God gave him a dream, and he shared that dream with his brothers, and part of this dream involved his brothers bowing down to him. That's not really a great dream you kind of want to share. You don't want to do that with your brothers, you know what I'm saying? And they reacted the same way you and I probably would have. They weren't too wild about it, so they began to get after Joseph and try to kill him. But one of the brothers said, let's not kill him, let's just throw him in a big hole. So they found this pit, threw Joseph in the pit. Joseph stayed in the pit for a season. If you know the story, a group comes by and they buy him as a slave. He heads over to Egypt, and he gets there, and he kind of builds a reputation, a good reputation. And then, as that's going well, he kind of gets accused of having an adulterous relationship with one of the king's officials' wives, and from there he's thrown into prison. This is the part where you might connect well. Maybe not, being thrown in prison or having an adulterous relationship, but this next part. Why he's in prison. He's forgotten about. Do you feel that? You ever feel forgotten about? Hey man, don't you remember I went through a trial. I was accused of this. This is my anniversary of being cancer free, but it's like nobody remembers how hard this was. I'm walking through a divorce and everybody is just looking at me, but nobody's consoling me any longer. I feel like I've been forgotten about. I lost my husband. I lost my wife. I lost my child on this day. And for me, I never forget about it, but it seems like he or she has been forgotten about. That was Joseph. He was forgotten about in prison until the dreams started to come back. So the king, he had a dream, and they think, oh, we remember Joseph was a dreamer. Let's bring him back. Maybe he can let us know, kind of what's going on with this dream. So they bring Joseph back. He interprets the king's dream, and then we'll fast forward later, 22 years later to be exact, which doesn't sound really encouraging, but remember, long suffering, patience. 22 years later, 13 chapters, but after all that, he gets put back into a position of power again. The whole country experiences a famine. And remember, I'm just summarizing the story. And, guess who shows up in the middle of the famine? His brothers. His brothers came back, and they're looking for food. And now Joseph is in power, and Joseph has the chance to make a decision to give them food or not. And I'll tell you at the end of the message of what he does. And there's three things that we can learn from Joseph. Three things that we can put in place in our life to begin to grow in patience. And one of them is be confident in your purpose, not in your place. The place that Joseph was in was rapidly changing. He was in a place of power. He was a favored son. Then he found himself in a pit. Then he found himself as a slave. And then he found himself in favor of one of the king's officials. But then he went from there to jail, and he went from jail to being in a position of power again. He was constantly changing. He had a lot of ups and downs, some mountains and valleys. and the place, the seasons of your life, and they're going to change. And when you think about your story, there are highs and there are lows. There's some detours, and maybe you're in a detour right now. But what I'm telling you is when you read this story, you can see God never gives up on them. He's present. It's not a straight line. At 17, Joseph had it all figured out, just like any 17-year-old. But God was so faithful, and He used all those different seasons. I know that you can relate, and here's what's happening. And as you hear the struggle, you think about his pit. You're thinking to yourself, I never thought in this season of my life I wouldn't be able to find good friends. I never thought this season of my life I would be getting a job to here or there, a different state, different city. I never thought in this season of my life I'd be going through a divorce. I never thought in this season of my life I would be widowed. I never thought I'd get cancer. I never thought I'd still not be able to get pregnant. No. But I just want to encourage you today, find your purpose. Not in the place, not in the situation, not in the circumstance, but in the promise of God. Because there's one little verse that keeps showing itself. In one little verse in every one of these trials, 4 different times you see the same verse. The Lord was with Joseph. And I'm begging you to see that. The Lord is with you. He hasn't abandoned you. He hasn't forgotten about you. He's still writing your story. It doesn't go in a straight line. I know it's a detour, but it's not in light of what God wants to do. And I don't know what your trial is. I don't know what your pit is. I don't know what the details are, but I'm begging you not to give up too soon. I don't want you to miss the miracle. So look at Psalms 34, okay, and hold on to this verse. Psalms 34 verse 18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." That is such a good promise. And another way that we can build patience is to be patient in the process. I hate both of those words, honestly. Patient and process. I've already talked about not being good at patience. But I'm not good at either one of those. I just kind of want to go, to the end of whatever's going on. Think of a vacation. All right, someone kind of has to plan the vacation. It's a whole process. But if it was up to me to plan in my family's vacation, we would never do any of those things. Or I'd book the first thing I saw because I'm not patient enough to find the best deals or location. But God bless me with a wife who is willing to plan and make sure that those things are taken care of. She understands that there's a process and all that. I want instant gratification. I want the Amazon Prime. I want the microwave, not the stove. But there's something to waiting. And it's something we need to learn. And it's growing to look and lead like Christ. And that's a process. Sanctification. And when you look at Joseph at 17, he gets this dream and he wanted it right away, and that's not the right thing. Instead he needed a season. He needed to walk through 22 years of trials. And then when he became a man that was in a position of power, that was a different dude than 17-year-old Joseph. He was seasoned. He had some maturity to him. All those things that God did in that difficult season, it took those trials to begin to have an understanding mind. My life from 17 to 33 is so different. There's a different level of understanding. And if you walk through cancer, if you walk through depression, if you walk through anxiety, if you've been through a divorce, you're understanding the people who are in that season. It's like you speak their language, and God's going to use that. The problem is we have to wait. It's a process we have to learn. The third way to grow in patience is to be faithful and to let God do only what He can do. It's not about your strength. It's not about what you can muster up. It's about coming to Him and seeing the fruit of the Spirit come out of you. And then, if you just begin to imagine what all could God do on the back end of this trial. So let me see if I can, kind of blow your mind there for a second. All right, so let's go to Genesis chapter 50. Remember Joseph, his trials, the 13 chapters. Watch how Joseph handles this moment when his brothers that sold him into slavery show back up. So in Genesis 50, 19 through 21, it says, "But Joseph said to them, 'Don't be afraid, I am in the place of God. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid, I will provide for you and your children.' And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them." It was enough for him to just be nice to his brothers. And then he said he was going to provide for their family, for his brothers after they sold him into slavery. And then he said, I'm not only going to provide for you, I'm going to provide for your children. That part really got me. And can I just be honest? And this might be a little petty. Was the last little part where he said he even spoke kindly to them. I'm sorry, but I don't know if I could speak kindly to my brothers after all. If I had a bunch of brothers and they did, I don't know if I could speak kindly to them after all that they would have done. But Joseph was willing to speak kindly to them. That is not a work of his flesh. That is a work of the Spirit. Now, each one of these things that I've walked you through, I want you to see them in Jesus' life. And when you begin to experience that fruit, when you experience Jesus, you invite him into your heart, and all of a sudden he's going to come out of you. That's what this whole thing's about. Remember I said be confident in your purpose, not your place. Think about Jesus. For 30 years, he walked, he was here. For 30 years he waited. His place and the people, he was with, that ragtag team of guys, for 3 years he walked through incredible, difficult season after season of, and he had his ministry where he was betrayed and he was disappointed by people. The place was not the thing. It was the purpose that he had to hold on to. Be patient in the process. In Luke 2:52, it said he grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor. That was Jesus' life. We can see all those things in Jesus. Be faithful to God and do only what he can do. Jesus, he was raised from the dead. God did a work in him that is so unexplainable for me and you. It's beyond us. And we see it in the life of Jesus. When you're patient, you're becoming more and more like Jesus. And patience is possible because Jesus was patient. It's active endurance. You remember what Jesus said on the cross? Man, this is so beyond me. Again, he's on the cross and he says, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus is dying on the cross, asking our holy and heavenly Father to forgive those who are putting him through that pain. You can see it in Joseph. He forgave his brothers. He spoke kindly to them. I'm telling you, you've got this in your life. You know, and you might have a relationship with an ex or a child or a relationship you're trying to reconcile, and that's not in you. Forgiveness. But he said this, Father, forgive them. That's part of this. Active endurance is being impatient. It is being patient. And if there's a verse to grab and hold on to, I'm gonna give it to you in a second. But I've been in that season before where you're in the pit, and like that's just where you are. You just got the diagnosis, and you're just now walking through these things. I've been there. And this is something you need to hold on to. And if you need a verse for the season that you're in, it is this. And that's Hebrews 12, verses 1 through 12. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." That's what I'm asking you to do. Fix your eyes on Jesus. From the pit, from the palace, from wherever you are today, fix your eyes on Jesus. There's another level of power there. Patience pushes us to Jesus. Thank you, and may God bless you.